Seaport. I am Matt Berry in for Greeny. He's still having his fancy coffee there in Green Bay at the draft. We have a lot to talk about this morning. You've got Graz, you've got Neek here in Seaport.
Coffee in Green Bay.
You got Peter Schrager. You have Ryan Clark. They are in Green Bay as well. What a draft it was last night. It was highly anticipated for several reasons. And that's where we're going to kick things off this morning with some draft winners and losers. Ryan Clark, starting with you. Who was your biggest winner?
For me, it's Travis Hunter and the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you want to recreate a culture, when you want to start something anew with Liam Cohen and James Gladstone, you got to go get a dog. And that's what they did on both sides of the football, getting a unicorn in Travis Hunter. And now it's not about going to Cleveland and having to focus on being a wide receiver. He can do exactly what he wants to do, which is play both sides of the ball and impact every single game.
Also living in the state of Florida, that's a win. Peter, who was your biggest winner?
I'm going with the Giants. I thought they executed the chessboard perfectly. They got the number 3 overall pick in Abdul Carter, who was a number 1 player on a lot of boards, and then maneuvered the draft in a way where they knew the exact point to get in and the exact value of where to get it, and they got their quarterback in Jackson Dart. The Falcons gave up a first-round pick to move in a pick behind them. The Giants didn't do that. They gave up a 3rd rounder and the 34th pick. Love what the Giants did. Great job by Shannon Dable getting their guys.
Let's go to our negative panelist. Neek, who was your biggest loser?
I mean, somebody got to do the hard work. Somebody got to do the hard work. Everybody want to be happy-go-lucky. Russell Wilson, he has moved on to another location where they drafted a quarterback behind him, and it's not going to work out for him there in the long term. So I think that if we had to pick a loser, and I got to do the dirty work of pointing it out, I think it's Russell Wilson.
All right, Cross, pick us up. Now, who's your loser?
Hey, Dan, set up the whole A block for us. Shedeur Sanders thought he'd be a first-round pick. A lot of people thought he'd be a first-round pick, and he was not. So he has to sit through today and at least a portion of tonight continuing to wonder where he goes. It's been a disappointing pre-draft process for Shedeur Sanders. Not that he necessarily did anything wrong, but just sort of the perception of him as a surefire first-rounder to now second-rounder at best. That's tough. I think it'll work out for him in the long run, but it couldn't have been fun last night and this morning.
You know, speaking of Shedeur, he took to Instagram last night after not being selected in the first round. Here's what he had to say.
We all didn't expect this, of course, but I feel like with God, anything possible, everything possible. I don't feel like this happened, you know, for no reason. All this is, of course, fuel to the fire. And under no circumstance, we all know this shouldn't have happened. But we understand we're on the bigger and better things. Tomorrow's the day. We're going to be happy regardless. Legendary.
You know, you got to give Shedeur a lot of credit for doing that after a rough night on national TV where a lot of people expected him to possibly go in the first round. We'll get to that in a minute. But, Graz, I want to start with you. There's a million ways to unpack this decision. I want to start with this. What is it about Shedeur Sanders, or what was it about Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback prospect that teams who needed a quarterback decided not to draft in the first round?
Yeah, I think what we heard a lot was, you know, he's a very good player, but doesn't have that elite trait, right? Doesn't have the cannon arm. He doesn't have the foot speed that you look for when you're trying to get like a special guy in the first round. Add to that the fact that this was not perceived as a very great quarterback draft. 6 went in the top 12 last year. 2 went in the entire first round last night. So that tells you that teams kind of perceived this quarterback class differently, and Shedeur Sanders is a part of that. If he's the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in a class that, you know, where the top guy would have been 4th or 5th last year, then people weren't going to be clamoring to take him. Once he wasn't the Giants guy, once he wasn't the Saints guy, it was up to Pittsburgh really to stop the slide, and obviously they decided they had a bigger need at D-tackle.
Yeah, and I think there wasn't a ton of quarterback-thirsty teams in part because last year we had so many young quarterbacks taken. And you look around the league, there aren't a bunch of teams that need a quarterback, and the teams that really needed a quarterback are traditionally near the top of the draft, and the evaluation didn't have Shedeur as that valuable. The real shocking one is once you get later in the draft to the Steelers, and what happened there was a lot more surprising than what happened earlier in the draft. But I think it's justifiable when you see what the Steelers needed for their roster, and when you see a team that had this similar situation happen with Kenny Pickett.
I'm going to go out to Ryan Clark and our contingent out there in Green Bay, because, RC, I think there's a couple of ways to attack this. One, there's Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback prospect who was on display last night. Then there's the Shedeur Sanders, the celebrity of the home of which he grew up in, which he cannot control that. From the quarterback perspective, your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who we all had at 21. We know they need a quarterback. We thought that might be where he go, but they ended up passing on him.
Well, the one thing I've gotten smart about when it comes to these mock drafts is if Peter Schrager and Mel Kiper and Field Yates start to push a prospect down the line in the draft, then that's what they're hearing on the phone. That is not their evaluation. So you could kind of feel that things were sliding this way when you looked at some of those mock drafts. And I do believe it's about the evaluation of the quarterback. I don't believe that coaches are stupid enough, if they have a job to do and they know that that job is winning, to pass up on people who they believe will help them win. And it's a part of what Dan said, right? He doesn't have the cannon arm. He's not a 4-5 guy. He doesn't have this big stature in the pocket. And so it's going to be, what things do I not have, or does he not have, that I can't teach? And I believe as teams went through that evaluation, this is where they fell on Shedeur Sanders. And here's what happens, right? The season ends, and Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are battling for 1-2 when we're talking about the best quarterback prospects. But this is before the evaluation starts. And so when you get to last night and we expect him to go first round, he expects himself to go first round, then it becomes a huge disappointment. What it said about this year is, if you ain't our guy, we ain't reaching for you at the quarterback position. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been through it with Kenny Pickett, decided they weren't going to go through it twice. And I do believe that Aaron Rodgers looming over that entire thing had something to do with that pick as well.
Peter.
Yeah, I mean, RC is as eloquent as it comes, not only on the Steelers, but in the entire landscape as it is. As we were saying, this whole week, I personally, I'm on the phones, and so is Schefter, and of course Field and Mel, and it's, you're looking for the team. You're trying to find the team. I didn't have the team. I put them going 21 to the Steelers in my mock draft, and my reasoning was, if there's any coach that could say, you know what, this is my guy, I feel good, it would be Mike Tomlin. Other than that, there wasn't the teams available, which Dominique said so perfectly to start it. There wasn't this draft class where there's 8 quarterback holes. But then again, this isn't that quarterback class, so now we're putting the onus on the young man, and I feel terrible. We're talking about him to start the show, but this became the story last night because of what we thought might have happened early on in the process, where he was looked at as a guy who might go in the top 10. Even as recently as a couple Fridays ago, when we get the Derek Carr shoulder news, we're on the show on Get Up, and we're like, does this mean the Steelers have to trade above the Saints to get Shedeur? And I'm trying to say, guys, hold on. Hold on a second. This doesn't do anybody any favors. And I think in Shedeur's case, this might have been the evaluation all along. It might have been the evaluation at least since the combine. And you can't fault these teams for not taking him when you know that in the Giants' case, they did 13 people at the pro day. They spent so much time in Boulder, and they still did not select him. They didn't do that because it's Deion